Now, what I'd like to talk about very briefly in this session is the idea that our environment impacts us enormously in terms of how we deal with stress and how it can affect us. If we surround ourselves with loud music and brilliant colours all the time, if it's too razzle-dazzle, we adopt a lot of that stress. Now, this can be exciting. So, for instance, if you can imagine a night on the town, loud music in a nightclub, neon lights shining everywhere, it's infectious. It becomes actually, it makes us, in some ways, uplifted, but it also adds a level of stress which, if we're feeling run down, can be a little bit too much. Now, it's very much the same thing in the home. When you have a house which is full of screaming children, and everything's very loud, and all the colours are very, very bright, and there's nowhere to go where it's nice and quiet, then you've got to expect that there's going to be a lot of anxiety, and there's a lot of tension in the house. Now, although it's very hard sometimes in a house, especially when there's young children, it's very, very important, if you are prone to a little bit of anxiety, to try and set up some part of that house where you actually do have your own space. If you're going through something which is negatively impacting your life, if you're going through anxiety which is really beginning to become a problem, then creating a sort of a safe space really is a good idea. Now, an alternative is now and then being able to get away to somewhere like a library or some other quieter, more relaxed place. The environment in which we place ourselves is going to have a huge impact on how we feel. When you surround yourself with bright colours, very harsh colours, reds and yellows, and those colours which perhaps you might associate with advertising, well, we're going to be highly energised and agitated by it. When you put slightly more muted colours in place, then you can feel a little more relaxed. Now, you can see this in play. In many instances, a lot of people find it very restful to go into a church, and for whatever spiritual reasons they have, often you'll find in a church that those colours that you're likely to encounter are very gentle. The sounds that you're likely to encounter are very gentle. Same in a mosque or a temple of some sort. Now, in the same sense, when one takes a walk in a very beautiful forest, the colours are muted, they're diffused, and we feel different to when we're in, for instance, the middle of Times Square in New York, right? So there's no question about it. Our environment has a massive impact on how we feel. Now, once we accept that, then we're already a long way to creating a better solution. If you want to diffuse your environment a little, you will diffuse some of the tension from your life. Now, in my hypnotherapy practice, I see some fairly unusual things, but I've certainly had instances where clients have come in and they have become increasingly agitated in places where the light is either far, far too harsh, and it's usually artificial light. And a good example is some people in malls do become very agitated. I've got to say, I really do hate shopping malls, and I don't know whether it's because of the environment itself or what it is, but for some reason it seems to trigger some level of anxiety. Now, I'm certainly not alone in that. I know that for some clients it's to the point that it really is a problem. And what I often tell them is that we are all meant to be somewhere, at an almost primeval level, at a primitive level. Some of us really thrive out on the plains. You know, I mean, in Canada we have 3,000 miles of plains between Calgary and I don't know where the next highland is heading east. But it's a huge plain, and it's the same in some parts of Africa. There's an area in South Africa we call the Highveld, and some people thrive in that area. Other people really can't manage it very well. Some people seem to thrive when they're in the mountains, and this is a very obvious thing, so I always feel more comfortable and more at home. And I've got dear friends who really, they're never quite as at home as when they're in the mountains. For others, and I think I fit in this one, we just do better by the sea. And one could say, well, it's to do with humidity, or it's this, or it's that. But the reality of the fact is, we do have some environments in which we thrive, and there are other environments in which we really don't. And when we're fighting against that, when we're resisting that, we don't do well. So by choosing your environment and recognizing which is the environment in which I do the very best, then you're going to actually be playing along to where you should be and who you should be. So if, for instance, you do have a problem with artificial light and you do have a few other things, try moving yourself, just going for a walk by the sea, or going up into the hills, going up into a mountain and taking a walk in the forest, or even if you happen to be near some open land. See if you feel different as you do so. And eventually you'll find that there are some places that you seem to resonate more healthily with. And there's a lot of clues there as to how you should be managing things. Now, one could also bring that right down to diet and a few other things. Here in Canada, it's very, very interesting the way when we look at immigrant communities. If you look at, for instance, the communities from the Urals, many of them, and from the Ukraine, many of them moved into the plains, into places like Winnipeg and into Manitoba, and they thrive there. And of course they know how to make a living there. Their farming background is very similar, and this is families going back, in many instances, many generations. They just do better there. Same as in this part of BC, we have a lot of Northern Europeans, English, but also people from Scandinavia, people from Holland, and they're always living by the sea. In many instances, they're fishing families or farming families that go back many, many years. There really does seem to be just some places we thrive, and other places where we can exist, for sure, and we can maybe do well, but they just don't feel quite right. Whenever we look at our environment, we tend to think, well, we can adapt to anything. That's probably true. But at the same time, there are some places which we just feel better. And in the end, it seems like everybody likes to go out and have a sunny holiday on a beach every now and then. Well, that's part of who we are. It's part of our primeval self. So, when one starts to listen to these things, it starts to become much easier to really understand how we can take away some stress. One can even bring this through to food and exercise. There are certain foods and exercises which resonate with us better. So when we apply some of these feelings, trusting how we judge these things at an intuitive level, we're probably getting closer to being the people we are meant to be. And the moment you start to do that, you take a lot of stress out of your life.